If it's Friday, Hurricane Helene slams into the U.S. as the first ever Category 4 storm to strike Florida's Big Bend, killing more than 30 people in 4 states, knocking out power for millions and dumping a record amount of rainfall, with emergency water resource rescues underway. Plus, 39 days to the election, Vice President Harris heading to battleground Arizona for her first visit to the southern border as a candidate, as former President Trump barnstorms Michigan. And New York City Mayor Eric Adams pleads not guilty in his first federal court appearance since being indicted on bribery and fraud charges, as City Hall reels from multiple investigations. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker, and we do begin with breaking news as what is now Tropical Depression Helene continues its path of devastation through the southeast. It made landfall overnight as an historic Category 4 storm with its fierce winds stretching 420 miles wide, making it one of the strongest and largest storms to ever hit the Gulf area. And this satellite image shows just how widespread the storm still is, with its outer bands as far east as Raleigh, North Carolina, and as far west as Missouri. This storm moved fast and it hit hard. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp saying Helene is responsible for at least 11 deaths in his state. One of those victims was a first responder. Atlanta declared a flash flood emergency for the first time ever. And despite warnings from authorities, residents say they were still stunned by the rising water.
I wasn't even expecting to be nothing like this. I thought it maybe like wind damage or anything, like trees falling, things of that nature. But I never expected this. This is beyond my dreams.
You know, I just didn't expect this to happen. Like living over here, it wasn't something that came like across my mind. This is so crazy. And I feel so bad for the people's cars that are underwater. I'm like, oh my gosh. I don't know what I would do.
There have also been at least 2 storm-related deaths in North Carolina. This was the scene today in Asheville. Governor Roy Cooper is calling Helene one of the most destructive storms ever to hit the state.
With the rain that they had already been experiencing before Helene's arrival, this is one of the worst storms in modern history for parts of western North Carolina. The end of the rain is not the end of the threat. This fierce storm will move out of our state in the next 24 hours, but the danger will not be over.
All of this comes as rescue crews continue in Florida. Take a look at this Coast Guard rescue of a man and his dog just this morning. Crews found them in a disabled sailboat 25 miles off Sanibel Island after the man sent out a Mayday call. In this video from Paso County, just north of Tampa, you can see how fires caused by the storm complicated rescues overnight. And take a look at what the storm did to Clearwater Beach in Pinellas County. Officials say at least 5 people in the area were killed. The initial death toll, according to officials across multiple states, is at least 30, and millions right now are without power. Just devastating scenes there. For more, I'm joined by NBC News correspondent Priya Sridhar in Atlanta, Jesse Kirsch in Keaton Beach, Florida, and Priscilla Thompson in Valdosta, Georgia. Also with me is NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Priya, let me start with you. We were just talking about the rescues there. We saw some of that extraordinary video. How many rescues have been conducted so far in Atlanta?
Kristen, dozens of rescues happened here in Atlanta overnight. Many people evacuated their homes when they began to realize that their homes were flooding, but others were stranded overnight, and swiftwater rescue teams were trying to get to them today. This is one of several neighborhoods here in Atlanta that you can see is still very much submerged. You can take a look at that vehicle behind me there and that mailbox. At one point during the day, you couldn't see the license plate at all, so the water is is starting to recede just a little bit. We did fly a drone over this neighborhood, and we actually saw some homeowners at the back of the street who were trying to get rid of water in their house through their windows. We also are hearing reports of fire crews going door to door overnight, knocking on residents' homes, trying to evacuate them and warn them of these flood waters that are happening. As you mentioned, Atlanta has never, ever had a flash flood emergency. We've had warnings and we've had watches, but not an emergency. And the thing that made all of this so much worse, Kristen, is that it's actually been raining here from an unrelated storm system since Wednesday. So this is actually the most rainfall that the city of Atlanta has seen in 150 years, Kristen.
Wow. Well, as you are showing us and telling us, the floodwaters are still incredibly high. As you say, they are starting to recede there. Based on your conversations with the folks who live in the area, how are they holding up and dealing with this devastation all around them?
Well, you heard from some people that spoke there that said that they were completely surprised. You know, this is the type of thing that we're used to seeing down to the south. Our neighbors in Florida, they have hurricanes. People here in Atlanta don't necessarily expect to get hit by hurricane-forced winds. So while a lot of people did heed those warnings and stayed off the roads and stayed at home, all the school systems in the area have been closed for the past 2 days. Most offices have been shut down. Local businesses shut down as well. Only essential employees are going to work. We also heard from a lot of homeowners who said, listen, we didn't take our cars out of our driveway, and now they're dealing with the consequences of that, with their cars unfortunately experiencing potentially a total losses. The good news in all of this is that at least here in Atlanta, the mayor has reported that there were no significant injuries or fatalities. So the most damage we're seeing is property damage. And there are still some people who haven't been able to return to their homes to even begin to assess that, Kristen.
Wow. Well, the images behind you certainly tell the tale. Priya, thank you so much for your great reporting. Please continue to stay safe. Priscilla, let me turn to you. You are in hard-hit Georgia as well, in Valdosta. Talk about how bad the damage is there that you're seeing.
Yeah, Kristen, the damage here is widespread. I'll give you a sense of in this neighborhood alone. You've got crews working there trying to get the tree off of this home. These folks, that guy up there that you see with the chainsaw is Evan. He's been out here since 7 a.m. going from house to house. This house right next door on the right also has crews working to remove a tree here. So that's one house, two houses, and house number 3 right next door, another house. 3 trees that have fallen on the backside of their home. And I will tell you, on the front side, there are about half a dozen trees that are down there. So this is widespread through this neighborhood, these trees that have gone down. And we're talking about massive trees. And the neighbors we've spoken to have said when Hurricane Idalia came last August, they dealt with a similar issue. And they thought at that time that that was a once-in-a-lifetime event, that they would never see anything like that again. And here they are dealing with it again. And I'll show you one more issue that is a big concern here, and that is the power outages, the power lines. You've got nearly 1 million people in Georgia right now without power. 99% of the people in this county don't have power. As you can see, the sun is out. People are trying to do work on their homes, and so it's hot. They need that power restored. There are no restaurants or anything like that open because there is no power. So it's a pretty dire situation here. And the governor did say earlier today that he activated 1,000 more National Guard soldiers or Georgia Guard soldiers for a total of 1,500. And they are working to remove debris from the roads so power crews can get out and work to restore that service. Kristen?
It is just so devastating to see the images of those trees that have fallen into the homes behind you. You can only imagine how difficult it is for the homeowners there. Priscilla, thank you so much for your great reporting. We really appreciate it. Jesse, let me turn to you in Keaton Beach, Florida. Obviously, Helene first made landfall in Florida at about 11 o'clock last night. What are you seeing where you are right now, and how is the community there holding up?
Yeah, Chris, we're actually in Perry, Florida. This is where we rode out the storm last night. We got the eye wall. We got a direct hit from the eye. And you can see on the main roads now a good amount of traffic, but it still appears there's a good amount of power outages here. And take a look at what those hurricane force winds can do. We were talking about a Category 4 storm. This was the third hurricane to hit this community in little more than a year. Two of them major hurricanes, Idalia being the other major hurricane last year. And take a look at this. All the shattered glass on the floor, blown out windows. And this business tells us that in the back corner there where you see that dangling, what appears to be ventilation piping, that was a brick wall or a stone wall of some kind, a block wall that has been blown out now. And there was also some windows that they turned into a wall after last year's hurricane, and that wall has now been pulled apart too. This is the aftermath of what was effectively like us having a tornado overhead for more than an hour. We have an official wind gust clocking of just shy of 100 miles per hour in Perry, but we may have had even more. I can tell you from experiencing it myself, those gusts were enough to push us back. Felt like getting pushed in the chest. Had our hats blowing off, trying to hold them down, and I saw trees that must have been 20 feet tall bending a good amount. We saw like a blue hazy flash in the sky. It appeared to be something going on with power transformers. Just a really eerie scene. Then you get that quiet from the eye of the storm. This is the impact from the wind. But of course, the bigger concern in terms of a threat to life in a hurricane is typically the storm surge. And the preliminary modeling that the National Hurricane Center is talking about shows that we may have had at least 15 feet of storm surge in some areas along the coastline in these communities. And I checked in with the county a short time ago here in Taylor County, Florida, told us they do not have any deaths to report at this time, which is good news. But I can tell you that we spoke to the sheriff before the storm made landfall yesterday, and he told me that there may have been as many as 200 people who were refusing to heed the evacuation request. They call it a mandatory evacuation, but the reality, the sheriff said, is they cannot force someone to be leaving their homes. And the concern is that there may have been a couple hundred people who did not leave, and again, may have been in that 10 to 20-foot range of storm surge that we were forecasting ahead of time, Kristen.
Oh, and obviously the warnings were so dire and so serious. As you say, some people did not evacuate. Have you been able to talk to any of the people who decided to stay and ride the storm out, and how are they doing?
We haven't talked with anyone per se who we know definitively just stayed here. I mean, there's certainly people sheltering where we were. We know someone working at the gas station said they were going to stay open. Eventually it looked like they closed, but may have still been there. We saw some cars on the road, even in the eye wall, which is when you have those absolutely horrifically high wind speeds. But I can also tell you a silver lining. There was a young man we met who was working at a restaurant that we were able to eat at before things closed down. And he said he was going to be staying because his grandma was staying and he was going to be with her. And I had him get her on the phone, and we just conveyed this is different. They've had storms here before. People in Florida on the Gulf Coast are no strangers to hurricanes, but this was a different storm. The sheriff had explicitly told me he's lived here his whole life, and the other storms have not had him worried. This one did, and thankfully that young man tells us he and his grandma made it out of town in time. Kristen.
Wow. Fantastic that you made that difference for at least one family, and certainly many more through all of your great reporting. Jesse Kirsch, we really appreciate it. Please stay safe, my friend. Bill, let me turn to you now for the big picture. I mean, we just did the whip around with all of our correspondents. The images are devastating and just so stunning to look at. What are the areas, based on what you are seeing, that are hardest hit at this point?
Well, Kristen, I hate to read off my phone, but this is just coming in to me now. We still have developing situations out there. We're getting word that the Walters Dam, the operators have reported a failure. That's on the Pigeon River in Tennessee. It's a large dam, and they're evacuating all the towns downstream. So all of these pink areas here are flood emergencies. This one here, there's Asheville. Interstate 40 goes through here, and then it goes through the mountains here. It's a beautiful drive in Interstate 40, and that's where the dam, we're hearing, it has failed. We don't know if it's a complete failure, but if the dam operators are saying it's a failure, and they're evacuating everything downstream. The biggest town downstream is Newport, Tennessee. About 8,000 people live there. There's a jail there. They're evacuating the jail. They're telling all the residents to get out of the way. The wording from the warning for this flash flood emergency, it says if the dam completely fails, the flood wave will reach the Waterville Hydro Station in 20 minutes, Hartford, Tennessee in 30 minutes. It'll make its way down to Wilton Springs in about an hour. It will get to Newport in about 2 hours. hours. So this would be if the dam completely fails and there's just a wall of water coming down the valley on the Pigeon River. So that is a story we're going to keep you updated on. There's another dam that they've said is in imminent chances of failure. That one's in North Carolina, just to the southeast of Asheville, this little sliver in here. There's been so much rain that's headed into these water systems. All of the dam operators, they've had the doors open. They've been trying to maintain it. It's just too much water. It's just too much pressure for the system. Thankfully, the rain is over with in these areas, Kristen, so that's good. It's not going to cause any additional problems, but the damage has already been done. I saw a report of 240 roads are closed, inaccessible in western North Carolina. Cell services down in many cases. People were requesting rescues, but the rescuers couldn't get to them. And this is kind of a mountainous, isolated area. You start washing these roads out, and people get isolated. There's no way to get into some of these people, and especially if you get something like a dam break and washing out Interstate 40, that's the main thoroughfare between Tennessee and North Carolina for thousands of trucks every single day. So that's a story, obviously, Kristen, we're going to have to keep on top of here.
And Bill, just very quickly, where is this? It's now been downgraded to a tropical depression. Where is it heading now?
Yeah, so this thing is going to be a remnant storm. What's left of it combined with what we call like a regular storm that's spinning over the top of Mississippi. And you can see it just like, the clouds go from Kansas all the way off the East Coast. The rain goes from the Outer Banks into St. Louis. The area of greatest concern for heavy rain is up here in southern Ohio right now. It's kind of strange to think, Ohio is getting a tropical system, but that's the exact same portion of the storm that made landfall last night. And this thing has just been flying through this region. But Kristen, the biggest concern now is obviously all of these water issues from all this rain, the dams and the rivers. The pictures are probably going to be worse than some of the stuff we're seeing down at landfall.
Bill Cairns, thank you so much for that picture of what has happened and what to expect next. We really appreciate it. Know you'll stay on top of all of these developments. Well, we are keeping a close eye on this breaking news. We'll bring you any developments as we get them. Plus, Helene's rapid intensification and massive rainfall, both hallmarks of a hurricane in the age of climate change. I'll talk to a climate scientist about what lies ahead. But first, Harris versus Trump on the trail. We're live in Battleground, Arizona and Battleground, Michigan, where the candidates are holding dueling campaign events. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. It is a busy day on the campaign trail. Vice President Kamala Harris is on her way to the southern border in the swing state of Arizona. It's her first visit to the border since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee. And it comes after she characterized the U.S. immigration system as broken in an interview with MSNBC's Stephanie Ruhle earlier this week. Now, as we've been reporting, former President Trump has a big advantage on the issue of the border, according to our latest NBC News poll. Yesterday, while talking about Harris's planned trip to the border, Mr. Trump once again made dehumanizing comments about immigrants. Listen.
I will stop all migrant flights immediately. They should stop them tonight. She can do that. Just sign one little page saying stop the migrant flights. But she won't do that. They're infecting our country. They're destroying our country. We will seal the border. We will stop the invasion, and we will begin the largest deportation of criminals, the criminal element, which is a large portion.
While Harris is in Arizona to talk about the border, Mr. Trump spent the afternoon talking about the economy in Michigan, where early in-person voting is now underway. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. spoke before that event in Michigan. Before leaving for Michigan, Mr. Trump met with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Speaking to the cameras before that meeting, Mr. Trump talked about his plans to negotiate an end to the war with Russia and praised his relationship with Vladimir Putin.
So we have a very good relationship. And I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have, I see. Yeah, but it takes two to tango, and we're going to have a good meeting today. And I think the fact that we're even together today is a very good sign. And hopefully we'll have a good victory, because the other side wins. I don't think you're going to have victories with anything, to be honest with you.
NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is with Vice President Kamala Harris in Arizona ahead of her border trip, and NBC's Garrett Hake is following Donald Trump in Michigan. So, Gabe, let me start with you. We are less than 40 days until the election. Vice President Harris making her first trip to the border as the presidential nominee for the Democrats. Why now? What's her strategy?
Hi there, Kristen. Good afternoon. Well, Vice President Harris is coming here to the southern border to tout her record as a prosecutor, and her campaign is really trying to flip the script after so long when Democrats really didn't want to talk about the border. They've been highlighting her record on the issue over the last several weeks, and I've just learned from a senior campaign official that she also plans to propose even tougher asylum restrictions than what are currently in place under the Biden administration. So this comes as she is trying to hammer Donald Trump for what she sees as, earlier this year when he blocked that bipartisan border deal by urging House Republicans to vote against it. She plans to really hammer home that point, as she has been for the last couple of months, Kristen.
You know, it's interesting, Gabe, because earlier today, Trump actually tried to put the spotlight on some statistics that we're getting from ICE on undocumented immigrants with criminal convictions. What can you tell us about those numbers that have been released and how that's playing?
Yeah, that's right. That's right, and we're still learning about this over the last several hours. But earlier this week, the ICE director sent a letter to lawmakers, and one of those lawmakers from Texas, Tony Gonzalez, released that letter earlier today. And it says that in ICE's non-detained docket, that means people not in ICE custody but maybe waiting around for deportation proceedings, there are more than 13,000 people in the United States right now that had previously been convicted of homicide. However, Kristen, that's the timetable of this is really unclear. A source familiar with the matter tells my colleague Julia Ainsley that it's possible that some of these immigrants came to the U.S. before the current administration. Some of them may have had these convictions in their home countries and may never have been in ICE custody in the first place. However, former President Trump is, of course, highlighting these numbers and just spent some time railing against the Biden-Harris administration in his rally this afternoon in Michigan, Kristen.
It continues to be one of the biggest flashpoints. There's no doubt about that. And if you look at our latest NBC News poll, you see why voters give Trump actually the same advantage on the border as they give Harris on abortion. Let's talk about, again, just the timing of this. It comes as Trump is again saying some of those controversial comments I mentioned about immigrants.
Right. Yeah, Kristen, and look, when we're talking about polling as well, something else that we should highlight is, yes, Vice President Harris trails Donald Trump significantly by about 21 points when it comes to the issue of securing the border, according to our recent NBC News poll. But, Kristen, when you compare that to our poll back in January, Donald Trump led President Biden at the time by 35 points. So this comes as the Harris campaign really thinks that it can perhaps cut into the margin of Republicans in a key swing state like Arizona. They know she's not going to win on the issue of immigration outright, but if it could just make some headway in it, it could make the difference in critical swing states like Arizona, Kristen.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you so much for your great reporting from the border. Garrett Hake, let me turn to you, and I want to start off by playing something we heard from Ukrainian President Zelensky before his meeting at Trump Tower today. Look.
I want to discuss with you, I think, where we are together. I think we have a common view that the war in Ukraine has to be stopped and Putin can't win and Ukrainians have to prevail, and I want to discuss with you the details of our plan.
Garrett, you know, it's notable. He said, I think we share the view that Putin can't win and Ukrainians have to prevail. In fact, Trump was asked that question on the debate stage. Does he want Ukraine to win? He didn't say that he wanted Ukraine to win. How do you square that?
Yeah, and I asked Trump half a dozen times yesterday different versions of that question to try to pin him down a little bit ahead of this meeting and got basically nowhere. I think that was fairly smart Trump management from President Zelensky, who, kind of leaned into the empty space that is the Trump plan to end the war in Ukraine by suggesting that they have a mutual agreement on how it should end, and sort of leaning on Trump's proclivity to agree with people who say nice things about him, especially when they say nice things about him on television. But you're absolutely right. The idea that Ukraine must win and Putin must lose is very much not a Trump stated position. If it's one that he's keeping close to his vest to preserve a negotiating position, he's keeping it very close because he's not come anywhere close to the kind of comments that Zelensky sort of made on his behalf in that meeting.
Yeah, he certainly has not. Garrett, you are there in Michigan. Early voting is now underway. The remarks today by the former president billed as being focused on the economy. You and I have both been talking to Trump allies. Their big argument for Donald Trump right now is stay on message. Talk about the economy. Talk about immigration. What did you hear from him today? Did he stay on message?
No, Kristen, not really. I mean, this is sort of always the way that it works with Trump, especially in some of these longer format events. He hits the marks that are given to him, and then he hits the marks that are interesting to him. And we saw that today where he did talk about the economy. He talked about tariffs, sort of his favorite economic tool. But he also went on to say that he thinks his reliance on tariffs is part of the reason people are trying to kill him. He talked about RFK Jr.'s environmental policies and what he might put him in charge of. He talked about putting Elon Musk into his cabinet and putting him in charge of cost cutting. I mean, Trump was all over the map at that event, as he will likely be tonight, although this is a town hall format. You might be able to see behind me the chairs set up. It's actually a way in which the campaign, and they would never admit to doing this, but the campaign has a little bit of ability to try to get him a little bit more structured, because the questions he takes can at least guide him in the direction of an answer. Whether he chooses to walk that path is obviously only up to him, Kristen, and he often doesn't walk it.
That's for sure. Garrett Haake, we look forward to hearing what your big takeaways are from that town hall. Really appreciate it. And speaking of 2024, Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz are set to square off for the first and only vice presidential debate on Tuesday. We'll have special coverage right here on NBC News Now starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. Coming up next, the Israeli military launches strikes in the heart of Beirut, moments after Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed to keep fighting Hamas and Hezbollah at the United Nations. NBC's Matt Bradley felt the force of those strikes in Lebanon. He joins us next. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Turning now to major developments in the Middle East, where Israel's military says it carried out a strike in the heart of Beirut, targeting Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah, just moments after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu delivered forceful remarks at the UN. The IDF said it launched a precise strike on Hezbollah's central headquarters, located under a residential building in Beirut. You can see the images here as rescue workers search through the rubble for any survivors. The Prime Minister's office released this image of Netanyahu approving the attack. According to a Hezbollah spokesperson, Nasrallah was not in the building at the time of the strike and is, quote, fine. It comes as Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing pressure to de-escalate as the U.S. tried to broker a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. And yet, speaking before the UN General Assembly, Netanyahu made it clear that Israel would not back down.
As long as Hezbollah chooses the path of war, Israel has no choice, and Israel has every right to remove this threat and return our citizens to their homes safely. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Joining me now is NBC's Matt Bradley in Beirut. So, Matt, you have been in Beirut for several days now. You actually felt the force of these strikes. Explain what you saw and what you heard.
Yeah, it was right here. We're in the hotel, which is right on the water here on the coast of Beirut, and the explosion was just behind me, just off my right shoulder here. This is the southern neighborhood of Dahia. It's a Shiite Muslim area. You know, this is a very sectarian country, so a lot of this is sort of divided up. This area is also kind of the center of Hezbollah's force. It is in Beirut, so while most of the Shiite population and most of Hezbollah's support comes from the south of the country and from the Bekaa Valley in the east, Dahia is really the headquarters, and that's where Israel struck. And they did it trying to hit Hassan Nasrallah, which is the Secretary General of this group, and it looks as though we don't know for sure whether he survived. And that's a crucial question, because the question of whether or not he would survive this or whether or not he was killed, that's going to determine really what happens next, whether or not what kind of reaction we get from Hezbollah and what kind of reaction we get from the Israelis. You know, it was only a couple of days ago that it looked almost certain like the Israelis were going to be launching a ground invasion into Lebanon in order to finally snuff out Hezbollah, which is something they've been trying to do for decades. Now it looks as though there's this frenetic diplomatic effort to try to bring some sort of measure of peace to that border region between Israel and Lebanon. Whether or not that succeeds, well, the Israelis seem to have kind of shot it out of the water. Benjamin Netanyahu, after looking like he was going to sign on to the deal the night before, then yesterday looked as though he wasn't going to. It looked as though he was getting threats from the right wing of his cabinet saying that they would withdraw from the government, and that would essentially sink the government if he were to sign on to this deal. So all of these things are happening all at once, and it's very hard to keep track and to know exactly what's going to be happening next and to stay ahead of the ball here. But the fact is that this is a deeply unstable situation, and we're already seeing the numbers, the casualties, increasing by the moment. Kristen?
Well, and as you say, they are still trying to assess exactly what happened. But so far, based on your conversations, what has the reaction been in Lebanon and the reaction to Netanyahu's speech at the UN?
Well, we don't know exactly what's going on. The reaction from Netanyahu's speech, I mean, this is something that, of course, a lot of people here were paying attention to. You know, I think a lot of folks here, they blame Netanyahu. They blame Israel, of course, for what's going on, for now wreaking havoc on southern Lebanon, for sparking a huge internally displaced refugee crisis, and for killing now more than 700 people in just the past week. That's really the highest concentration of casualties that we've seen ever since the end of Lebanon's civil war back in 1990. So they blame Netanyahu, but, you know, there's going to be a lot of anger. This isn't new, what we heard from Netanyahu. This is kind of his greatest hits, you know, and he echoed a lot of what he said about Hamas, saying that Hezbollah is backed by Iran. He said that about Hamas, calling Iran the primary enemy behind all of the forces that are out to get Israel. He said this before about Hamas, saying that Hezbollah is hiding behind civilians and human shields. He's, of course, said that about Hamas as well, and threatening to destroy this country if they don't reject Hezbollah and kind of give up and kind of reject their attacks on Israel. This is all echoes of what we've heard for the last year when it comes to Israel's fight in the Gaza Strip. Now we're hearing it about Lebanon, and of course that's deeply, deeply frightening to folks here, many of whom don't support Hezbollah at all, blame Hezbollah for dragging them into this war, even if they do feel a fierce sense of pride in the resistance and a hatred for Israel. They do resent Hezbollah as well for bringing them into this war and causing all of this destruction. Kristen?
Matt Bradley covering all the angles there for us. Thank you. Please stay safe, my friend. Really appreciate it. I now want to bring in Ambassador Dennis Ross, former U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East and an NBC News Foreign Affairs analyst. Ambassador Ross, as always, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I want to get your reaction to the developments today, the strike on Hezbollah's headquarters. Of course, it came right after Prime Minister Netanyahu has wrapped up his remarks at the UN. Put this into broader context for us. Is this the biggest escalation that we've seen to date of this conflict?
Well, it certainly reflects what the Prime Minister was saying at the UN when he said enough is enough, that it has been nearly a year since Hezbollah began firing into Israel the day after the Hamas onslaught last October 7th. And that 60,000 Israelis have been, in a sense, evacuated from their homes, haven't been able to return. The decision to go after the Hezbollah headquarters in downtown Beirut is obviously in keeping with what we've seen over the last week. It started with the pagers and the walkie-talkies. Then after that, Hezbollah, no doubt, because they couldn't trust their forms of communication. You had Ibrahim Akil, who was one of the most senior Hezbollah military operatives, bring together the whole command structure of the Radwan forces, and Israel took them out in downtown southern Beirut. So a decision was made to basically communicate to Hezbollah, unless you decouple your position, where you stop firing in and you agree to ensure there's no Hezbollah forces close to the border, we're going to continue this. We're going to raise the cost. You're going to see you can't sustain it. That's what I think we're seeing Israel do The threats of coming in on the ground are suggesting that we will clean out that area and create a security belt. All this you can understand at one level. The question, though, I guess that is appropriate to ask, and that I will tell you I ask is, okay, so tell me how this ends. How does that actually bring Israelis back? I understand. I think we need to understand one of the reasons that I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, whatever he communicated to the administration, clearly they thought they had a deal. And if they did, he backed off. And if that's the case, I think the explanation is there's interesting wall-to-wall support for what Israel is doing, and it shows politically, and it shows a frustration level that for the last year, Hezbollah has been able to depopulate the northern part of Israel. When Yair Golan, who is the head of now the combined labor and merits, this is the left wing in Israel, who wanted an end to the war in Gaza, he was against the ceasefire proposal because he had the sense, along with Yair Lapid, that maybe this goes too far in terms of allowing Hezbollah to reconstitute itself. So I think what we're seeing is a political mood reflecting great frustration in Israel and a sense that the last week has produced real damage to Hezbollah. And I think all that's true. The question is, can Israel take what they've done along with what they've done in Gaza and say, you know, we have changed fundamentally the threats we faced in Gaza and in the north from what it was a year ago? Are there ways for us to use diplomacy to basically say to the Israelis, okay, now it's time to declare success, so we have a way out? I think that's an important way to go. Look, this is a very complicated setting, to say the least, in which to conduct diplomacy.
Well, and that was effectively my next question to you is, and just a temporary ceasefire, the temporary ceasefire that the U.S. was trying to broker, is that still possible after today and given what you are describing?
I think it's more difficult to achieve right now because I think especially the mood in Israel, and I think that's what affected Netanyahu's decision vis-a-vis the American-French proposal. I think that mood is we are now doing to Hezbollah what we should have done a long time ago. And so it's pretty hard, I think, to contain that. Now, the question is, in another week or so, or say 2 weeks, when you still aren't able to move people back to the north and you're doing more and potentially going in on the ground, will there be a sense that maybe that's the moment, or maybe before Israel would go in on the ground, is there a sense in Israel to say, okay, this is the moment? In any case, I think the one thing the U.S. should be doing is also talking to the Lebanese. The Hezbollah has prevented the appointment of a Lebanese president since November 1, 2022. They keep a stranglehold over the country, including basically turning it into a failed state economically. We have given a lot of money to the Lebanese army on the theory that it could be a stabilizing force. Is this the time for the Lebanese government, the Lebanese army, basically to go to Hezbollah, given how much disarray they're likely to be in, and to say, look, we don't want to see the country destroyed. Now it's time for us to reassert ourselves. Is this the time for us, from a diplomatic standpoint, to be making that effort? I would suggest it's certainly something worth pursuing at the moment.
Well, Ambassador Ross, as always, you deepen our understanding of this incredibly complex and tragic conflict that is now, as you say, we are about to mark 1 year since the October 7th attack. Ambassador Ross, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
In other news connected to Iran and the Middle East, earlier today, Attorney General Merrick Garland announced charges related to what the U.S. has characterized as a hack on the Trump campaign. The 18-count indictment says 3 men employed by Iran's Revolutionary Guard used spear phishing and social engineering techniques to target the Trump campaign, as well as other entities. They then sent the Trump campaign documents to individuals associated with the Biden campaign and other media organizations. Now, there is no indication the people associated with the Biden campaign responded to the emails. Garden today said they've seen, quote, increasingly aggressive cyber activity this campaign season from Iran and is working to mitigate the threat. Here's a little more.
As we approach the upcoming election, I want to reiterate that the Justice Department will not tolerate attempts by Iran or by any foreign power to interfere in our elections and undermine our democracy. The message of the U.S. government is clear. The American people, not a foreign power, decide the outcome of our country's elections.
FBI Director Christopher Wray also released a video calling out the Iranian regime.
So today, the FBI would like to send a message to the government of Iran. You and your hackers can't hide behind your keyboards. If you try to meddle in our elections, we're going to hold you accountable. If you try to attack our infrastructure or commit violence against our citizens, we're going to disrupt you. And as long as you keep attempting to flout the rule of law, you're going to keep running into the FBI.
In conjunction with the charges, the State Department announced today new sanctions targeting Iranian-backed cyber actors that have attempted to target U.S. elections. They've also offered a reward of up to $10 million for information on these cyber actors. Coming up after the break, an historic scene today in Lower Manhattan. Mayor Eric Adams arraigned on federal bribery and wire fraud charges as he faces new pressure to resign. We have the very latest on that story and the political fallout. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Embattled New York City Mayor Eric Adams made his first court appearance today after that scathing 57-page indictment was unsealed yesterday, charging him with, among other things, wire fraud and bribery. Adams pleaded not guilty to all 5 federal charges and was released on his own personal guarantee that he will show up for all court appearances. Adams is due back in court next week. His lawyer said he will file a motion to dismiss the charges. Meanwhile, 3 sources familiar with the matter tell NBC News Mayor Adams' chief advisor has now been subpoenaed for documents. Federal and state law enforcement officials also searched her home and seized her phone. Her attorney says she will cooperate with the investigation. Mayor Adams remains dug in, even as calls for his resignation are ramping up. Today, one of the most senior New York Democrats in Congress, Jerry Nadler, called on him to step down. Joining me now is Emily No, reporter at Politico and co-author of the New York Playbook. Emily, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Look, there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is a scathing indictment against Mayor Adams. What are you hearing his defense will be?
Well, this is indeed scathing. It's 57 pages alleging that the corruption on the part of the New York City mayor stretches back a decade into his days as Brooklyn Borough president. He is accused, as you noted, of fraud and bribery and taking illegal campaign donations and lavish luxury perks in exchange for smoothing the path to approval of a Turkish consulate skyscraper that actually wasn't ready to be opened because of various fire rules. In terms of his defense, he is denying any wrongdoing. His attorney, Alex Spiro, who actually represents a number of celebrities, is trying to say that this is about airline upgrades, taking one part of that scathing indictment and making it seem frivolous. The mayor seems pretty dug in. He did plead not guilty, and he is determined to run the city, as he said, of 8 million people, just as if he had no criminal case before him after all.
And as we just noted, increasingly, his fellow New Yorkers, elected officials, are calling on him to step down. Of course, Governor Hochul could remove him if she so chose. Here's part of a statement she released overnight. While I review my options and obligations as the governor of New York, I expect the mayor to take the next few days to review the situation and find an appropriate path forward to ensure the people of New York City are being well served by their leaders. What do you make of that reaction? And do you have any indication? As you say, he seems dug in. So do you see Mayor Adams resigning?
Well, we take here at Politico that statement by Governor Kathy Hochul as a sort of warning to the mayor, a close ally of hers, that he needs to consider the path forward and maybe even step down on his own accord. Now, according to the city charter, there are at least 2 pretty convoluted ways in which he could be forced out of office. One is by the hand of the governor. Another is via a 5-person committee. If he does vacate that seat, it would be the public advocate, Jumaane Williams, who would step in as acting mayor. There are going to be a number of discussions ongoing with and without him in the next couple of days that may involve House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who, like Adams, is a Brooklyn Democrat. Nadler, of course, is the highest-ranking elected official thus far, to call on the mayor to resign. I do expect that those calls will be increasing and maybe louder and rancor as the days wear on.
Yeah, I would anticipate. And of course, this will be one of the focuses of the Sunday shows as well. So to your point, those calls could potentially grow louder over the weekend and in the coming days. Look, if he is replaced, if he does step down, we know that there are a number of names who are eyeing the seat if there is a special election, including the former Governor Cuomo. Who's a serious contender here if he steps down or if he is forced to step down?
Well, in addition to former Governor Andrew Cuomo, whose name, like you said, is being floated, and who I believe loves to hear that his name is being floated, there are 5 Democratic challengers who have announced, or just on the cusp of announcing, who want to challenge Eric Adams in 2025. It may be the case that they get to run a little sooner in this special election, but I should stress that as deep and scathing and sweeping as this indictment is, it doesn't represent the whole of the legal troubles that Eric Adams' administration is in. As you noted off the top, his chief advisor was raided by the feds and had her phones turned over to state authorities. That's something her attorney confirmed to us. And just last night, the New York City Sheriff's Office was searched by the City Department of Investigation. So there's a lot to come, we believe, and the prosecution may not be over quite yet.
Well, I'm so glad you raised that, because that backdrop is so significant to this broader story. Emily No, thank you so much for sharing your fantastic reporting with us. We really appreciate it. Still to come, an update on Tropical Storm Helene as it churns further north, and how the effects of climate change are fueling these storms to be bigger, stronger, and more dangerous, according to experts. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are continuing to track Tropical Depression Helene, the center of which is now stationed over North Carolina. Helene is being blamed for at least 30 deaths in 4 different states. This is video from a doorbell camera that captured the storm surge in Cedar Key, Florida, inundating that home with water from the Gulf. Just a terrifying scene there. The National Hurricane Center says its initial modeling of Helene shows that it created a storm surge of at least 15 feet in parts of Florida's Big Bend region. And as destructive as Helene has been, consider this: it is the 8th Category 4 or 5 hurricane to strike the U.S. in the last 7 years. That's as many Cat 4 and Cat 5 landfalls as the prior 57 years. I'm joined by climate scientist Daniel Swain. Daniel, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So you say that this latest hurricane, Helene, is an indication and a product in part of climate change. Explain to our viewers why.
Yes, well, this most recent event that's unfolding is a sample size of 1, of course, but when you look at the broader picture, we know that the Gulf of Mexico, for example, is record warm this summer, and warm ocean waters are hurricane fuel. Helene was a powerful hurricane that has resulted in catastrophic flooding, not only in Florida, but all the way north into the Appalachians now as well. And we know that in a warming world, we see hurricanes that bring greater water hazards, in particular, those larger storm surges and more extreme rainfall as well.
And in terms of what we saw from Helene specifically, is it the strength or how quickly intensified, or both that are clear indicators? Yes, this is the product of climate change, in addition to everything you're saying.
Well, it's really all of the above. We don't necessarily know that we'll see more hurricanes in a warming world, but what's pretty clear is that the most intense hurricanes will be even stronger than they were historically. But the clearest indication really is that hurricanes in a warming world are bringing more extreme water-related hazards, and there's really 2 of those. One is the coastal storm surge you mentioned. In this case, it was the Gulf of Mexico coming inland in Florida, more than 15 feet deep in some places, as you noted. But the other is the amount of rain that these storms can produce, the amount of water that's fallen well away from the coast, all the way inland in the southern Appalachians, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, has produced widespread catastrophic flooding and even at least one dam failure. So this is an ongoing emergency. And we know that these water-related effects, the record-breaking rainfall, the record-breaking storm surges, really are a signature of climate change and how it's affecting hurricanes in this part of the world.
Given all of that, Daniel, how can state and local officials better prepare for these stronger, more intense storms that may be anticipated in the future?
Well, I think one is, the first thing is to recognize that this is not something that we only need to worry about in the future. This is a reality in the present, and we're seeing that now reflected in places like Florida, where the home insurance market is starting to be really affected by the fact there have been so many devastating storms there in recent years, more than the market can keep up with. So we're starting to see, both from a policy perspective in terms of insurance and emergency evacuations, and also from a tangible physical infrastructure perspective. You know, we're seeing highways washed out and dams failing, that we're starting to see where things can break at the seams when we experience events that are more extreme than we were accustomed to historically. And we're going to see more of that in a warming climate.
What is your message, Daniel, to communities that are more inland?
Well, I think we often think about hurricanes as coastal hazards, which in a certain sense is true. Hurricanes derive their strength from warm oceans, and it's one of the deadliest hazards associated with hurricanes is that storm surge, so when the ocean moves inland. But the other thing I think we've recognized in recent years is that some of the most devastating effects, and it does not necessarily take a powerful hurricane to produce this, by the way, sometimes even tropical storms like Harvey was in Houston can produce really severe inland flood events by the extreme rainfall that they can produce. And the unfortunate reality is that, in particular, is one of the signatures of these storms as temperatures rise.
Okay, Daniel Swain, thank you so much for bringing us your expertise. We will be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC stations with Steve Kornacki, who will join me with new polling. I'll also have interviews with Senators Mark Kelly and Marco Rubio, both exclusives. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.